So again, not being a doctor or a midwife of sorts at the time, you don't know all the stats. You know, if you're not given stats, if you don't know the procedures, if you don't know the outcome and the figures, a little bit like running a business. If you don't have all of those in your business, you don't know whether your business is going to be 100%. Successful or not. So that covers really how I own the tragedy of in terms of the thing that everyone listening needs to perhaps take on board or take away from this podcast is that success is subjective.
Welcome to Unstoppable Podcast with Harry Sardinas, inspiring conversations with influential millionaires, investors, thought leaders, entrepreneurs who are making a massive difference with their innovative products and services, and sharing the challenges and the wisdom of how they sold their first million.
So tell us, Mark, how you become adversity and what is the good thing to be an entrepreneur when you have to deal with adversity in life with your loved ones?
Sure. First of all, I'm glad to hear that your mother has recovered. That's first. I'd like to say that.
Took a lot of travel, though, and a lot of money. Thanks God that I was an entrepreneur. If I wasn't working, I couldn't save her life because I only can ask 1 month holiday. Absolutely. Thanks God that I was an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. And that's why I'd like to just take the conversation back about 2 minutes ago when you mentioned about your friend who was selling eggs and she wasn't supported by her mother, etc. The second thing I mentioned when you'd asked me originally, what are the 5 steps to growing a business to $1 million? The second thing I said, and everyone can pull this podcast back and listen to the second thing I said, and that is where I said, you need a business mentor that you aspire to be like. The worst people to ask in a new entrepreneur's life for help, support, financial investment are your closest friends and family. 2 reasons.
I agree 100%.
One, they only want the best for you anyway. And the second thing is, should it not work out, which may mean that it's not that it was a bad idea, it was just badly executed because you didn't have a business mentor to steer you in the right direction, your family are then the quickest to judge you because they still believe that they're supporting you by saying you were a fool for going into doing this, this, or this. So the reason why I would always suggest to somebody to have a business mentor is that it cuts down on one big thing, and that's time. Somebody can either spend the next 5 years developing a widget and trying to find a marketplace for their widget and hope that their widget will make them $1 million, or they can find a business mentor who will be quite harsh with them because he wants the best for them in a business sense, doesn't care about the relationship, they're not a relative of the family, they are not even a friend, they are a client. And every professional business mentor that has a client has his client's best interests at heart. The best interest being making $1 million, full stop, end of. That then leads on to what happened in my life. And I know you've mentioned about your mother falling ill. And as we've said, through funds, you were able to get her healthy again. So basically from the age of 8 until I was 24 and a half, everything I touched for those years turned to gold. I secured...
Wow, impressive.
Well, you know, it was about being, there's 2 things. It's about being in the right place at the right time and also being quite open to open your mouth and ask somebody for an opportunity. I only got to run Worcestershire's largest nightclub, which had a capacity of 2,500 customers.
Wow.
Because I spoke to the nightclub manager and said, I would love to run this place. There's a longer story to that, but we don't have to go for that today. But ultimately, having worked there for a short period of time as an underage barman, but I was 6'2". I had lots of curly hair in those days. Nobody would tell me.
Yeah.
At 18, I signed the documents. I was 18. I worked behind the bar. And then within 6 months, I was on the training program. And I took over the nightclub from the existing manager. And to this day, I am still friends with that manager who gave me that opportunity.
Wow.
Social media has helped us immensely over the years. I'm also friends with the DJ that I lived on the premises with. The premises were an old church. We lived in the vicarage in the grounds at the back, which is where the graveyard was, and still is in reality. It's still the land. And we've been friends for 38 years. So the other thing to have in your business career and life is validation. For everybody that comes into this world nowadays as a potential entrepreneur, they have to be able to validate what they're doing. And there's nothing better than having validation to say, I am working with a successful high net worth business mentor. That's another thing they need to do, unless they come from a wealthy business family. Therefore, they can carry on that as validation into their new entrepreneurship. So that's really the key thing that happened to myself when I was 24 and a half is my partner and I, my partner was 10 years older than me. She was actually quite like a business mentor because she had her own businesses at the time. And we met, when I was 18 years of age. So I was 18, she was 28. When I was 24, she was nearly 35. We decided to have a baby and we had a child, we had a son, and our son died.
Wow.
And through our son dying and being, as I just said a couple of minutes ago, everything I touched from the age of 8 to 24 and a half turned to gold. I didn't really deal with the death of my son particularly well, in the sense that I became a sudden introvert from being a very extroverted type of business person. And similarly, she never dealt with the death, of course, of her own child as well. It's more of a sad situation for a lady because they carry the child through to birth. But as a father, it was also quite traumatic. So there was a valuable lesson learned there for me, Harry, which kind of completely changed the way that I viewed
Well,
life.
that's a huge adversity. People go crazy. Some people go crazy. Some people start to drinking. Some people go to drugs. Some people go depressed. Some people divorce and start blaming. We hear stories here similar in this broadcast from others, and it's one of the toughest adversity that human being can overcome. So how you manage?
So I threw myself into work, more work than I was previously. As I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, there were lots of logistics companies that wanted a guy to step in to kind of be the fixer or the axeman. So generally, it was well known in the logistics industry, if Mark Walker turned up at your head office, he was either going to build the business or shut it down. And that was kind of the name that I carried for nearly 10 years. So by putting myself deeply into work, working on multiple projects, creating more multiple streams of income within my own businesses and other people's businesses, it kind of just took me away from dealing with the situation, which was the biggest challenge at that time. Now, since then, of course, I've had many clients who've been through every type of trauma, from loss of their own child to loss of their spouse or partner to a loss of a member of their family. So dealing with that kind of loss is something that every entrepreneur has to be ready.
And running a business at the same time is a huge challenge.
Yes. And this is some things that people don't take into account, Harry, when they try to become an entrepreneur. They don't kind of also understand that life will happen at the same time as they're trying to build a business.
Yeah.
And again, the worst type of people to have around you, and I use the word worst with a small w, but the worst type of people, as I've mentioned, are friends and family. Because if you have a sudden bereavement in the family, they're going to be involved in your business because of the bereavement. And so we have to have business mentors that work with us that can be compassionate, but also keep them on the straight and narrow to get to where their plan is going to be. Because somebody who sets out today to have a business that will turn over $1 million, that could happen within the first 6 months, or it could take 6 years. And if you have an adversity, will just come along at any time. It does not send you a letter in advance or an email to say, hey, this is coming down the pipe.
It's happening all of a sudden. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what you need is dealt with adversity, knows how to overcome adversity, has solutions for adversity. Sometimes the adversity can be just running out of cash on a project. And it may well be that the project actually wasn't a project in the first place, but their friend said, this is a great widget. You're going to sell millions of them. You'll be successful. And actually, when a business mentor steps in to look at the widget, it's kind of like, where do you think the marketplace is for this? And you can actually save people a lot of time, money, and effort by being completely open with them. Like I said earlier, my only interest for private clients is for their ultimate success financially.
Tell us, Mark, how you manage to deal with your negative emotion and how you let that go or deal with it so it didn't affect your business decision. Because when the entrepreneur is not in the right mindset and that negative emotions are there, I'm telling you, because of my own experience, they will take wrong decisions and the business can literally collapse.
No, absolutely. Well, there's a couple of things as well you've covered a few minutes ago when you said about success.
Yeah.
With the loss of my son, that was just, all I can say for people listening is I dealt with it. Ultimately, I dealt with it on my own personal level, as with my partner at the time after we'd separated. We dealt with it.
So what you did, Mike? You did some meditation, you walk in the park, what you find help, you find a mentor, how you manage, because it's really tough.
It is. But like I said earlier, everybody has their own personal level. And so what I would say wouldn't, it's not that I went off and discovered Christianity or religion or anything like that. I threw myself into work. Work was what I'd done since I was 8 years of age. I was now 25. So you can imagine with all of those years, once I threw myself into work and different projects, my mind was overtaken by the positive.
Canalize. Very good. Yeah, I get it.
A little bit like when somebody says, if you have a tumbler full of poison liquid, you take that tumbler and you pour fresh water into the tumbler, and eventually the tumbler overflows and all the poison gets washed out of the cup. Very similar to me in terms of the trauma and the loss of my son that I was experiencing, which was a physical pain loss. People might not think I'm talking like it now, but I'm 56 now. You know, I
Wow.
lost my son when I was 25. So, you know,
Wow.
it's a long time ago. However, I still think of him as
Absolutely.
if he was here this year. Not to the nth degree, but don't focus on other things.
No,
But
we
that was
understand.
that was a spiritual being who was fully formed, was perfectly on the inside of his mother, came out and just didn't breathe. And that's the bottom line. So, you know, dealing with that, but then also understanding from talking to the doctors and nurses at the time about the number of full-term pregnancies that don't come to fruition. That was an interesting statistic to learn back in the day as well. So again, not being a doctor or a midwife of sorts at the time, you don't know all the stats. You know, if you're not given stats, if you don't know the procedures, if you don't know the outcome and the figures, a little bit like running a business. If you don't have all of those in your business, you don't know whether your business is going to be successful or
100%.
not. So that covers really how I own the tragedy of in terms of the thing that everyone listening needs to perhaps take on board or take away from this podcast is that success is subjective to the individual. Some people might be happy to earn an extra £1,000 a week. Some people might want £10,000 a week, and there are some people that just want to have, you know, £10 million a year. That's fine. The challenge is to achieve those figures. It goes back to what I said right back at the beginning of the podcast. Step one, do you have a product or service that somebody wants to buy or utilize? That's key. But success is down to the individual and what they think is success. Somebody coming from a very poor background can make a lot of money and lose a lot of money very quickly because they don't know about money management. So that's one of the things that I teach in my one-to-one training. Some people can make a lot of money and hold on to a lot of money because then they're told how to store wealth, because wealth is just a storage. Whether you're storing wealth in gold and silver, or whether you're down the digital route and storing it in Bitcoin, a storage of wealth and an asset that grows is what people need to do. And they might sound like fundamental things for people listening, like, yeah, we've heard all this before. Well, if they've heard it all before, it's because they've not put it into practice. And if they put it into practice, and I'll give you the classic example of gold and silver. Gold last year, the price of gold over the course of 12 months went up 25%. This year to date, it is up 15% already. So
Wow.
if you take last year's figure at 25% growth, should somebody have made £100,000 or dollars, it doesn't matter about the actual currency, but 100,000 out of product or service, the last thing they should do, because they're now successful, is go and spend any of it. They should take their first year's profits and put it into a wealth creation tool such as gold or silver, or a particular coin like Bitcoin, focusing on gold. Because if they'd have put 100,000 into their gold account in January 2024, they'd have had 25,000 extra, again, pounds, dollars, it doesn't matter, in their gold account, Harry. And that's the key thing. People need to learn how to leverage the money that they've made to make more money. They literally would have made 25% more on their gold holding last year.
Follow us for more interviews with world's most influential, audacious entrepreneurs that overcame challenges and adversity, providing you with the blueprint of how they sold their first million so you can grow your business exponentially.